What's up, YouTubes? What's up, everybody out there in college football land? Well, it's college football land for a little while longer. It's also basketball time, and I'm going to be doing some live streams with the Vols Radio Network going on during the game. If I don't do the whole game, I'm gonna at least do the second half and a little bit of a post game show during all the Tennessee men's basketball games. But I've been wanting to do this show with Mark Rogers for a long time. We've been playing phone tag and email tag for a while. And a lot of you guys already know who he is. He's got a great channel. He's been doing it a long time. He's really big in analytics. And I just like to just have some time here to chop it up with him before football season is totally gone. So let me get him on the line here. Well, how you doing, Mark? I'm glad to have you on Volunteer Roadshow, powered by Roadshow Sports. How you doing, buddy?
Well, Bobby, it's good to be here. We've been trying to make this work for quite a long time, so it's great that we could finally connect because I've looked forward to this.
Yeah, I have too. I tell you what, I watched your channel, and I gave you a plug and put your YouTube channel link is in the description, and everybody needs to go check him out. He really is the voice of college football. He does a lot of great analytics and pick'ems. And how did you do in these bowl season, this bowl season on your pick'ems?
It's really strange because I've been predicting college football games since 1982. I was one of those little kids running around that was just fascinated with predicting games and saw Jimmy the Greek and people like that, Pete Axtell on picking NFL games. So I started to do that at a young age. So I have not missed predicting a bowl game or a top 25 regular season game since 1982. And there was actually a week that I got so busy right after that first weekend's play that I missed picking about 4 games. So my record's not going to quite add up to 40 or 41. But I went 24-9 predicting the game straight up, and I went 20-13 against the spread.
Wow, that's very impressive. Very impressive. I tell you what, my biggest 3 surprises was Clemson beating Alabama 44-16. I thought they could win it, but I didn't think it was going to be a blowout. And I was really surprised that Florida beat Michigan the way they did and that Kentucky beat Penn State. Now, I don't get to delve into all the matchups like you do, but those two games, Kentucky and Penn State and Florida and Michigan, they really surprised me. I really thought Michigan would beat Kentucky for one reason. Kentucky rode Benny Snell into the ground all year long, and I thought it'd catch up with them in bowl season. And I really didn't have Dan Mullen having his boys ready to play Michigan. I really didn't. I thought Michigan had a disappointing loss against Ohio State, and I thought they'd be ready. But those two were my other 2 big surprises. What are your biggest surprises of the bowl season?
So Clemson, Alabama, no doubt.
Yeah.
It wasn't as though I didn't give it any thought, that I didn't consider Clemson, because I did. I thought that Alabama might be a little susceptible through the air, which of course they were, and one of the reasons why they didn't have an elite pass rusher. Christian Miller's health was a concern going into the game, and that was one of the big issues I had. And just considering what Oklahoma was able to do, and I know it was kind of garbage time, but that Oklahoma second half and what they were able to do to Alabama on defense was reminiscent for me of what Deshaun Watson did a few years earlier, because Bama punched them in the mouth. They dominated the first quarter. They were up 14-0 against Clemson. And then once Clemson got the offense circulating and got in sync, Alabama was gassed at that entire second half against Clemson. They were against Oklahoma. I thought maybe Clemson could do it again with Trevor Lawrence. They did. But I rewatched the game, and that first quarter, besides the Tua pick six, and Clemson hit on 2 big plays on the one scoring drive. They went 62 yards to T. Higgins. They went 17 yards to cap it off, Travis Etienne. Alabama had three should-have-been touchdown drives. The first two were touchdown drives. The third one, they drove it down to the one, and then they had a false start, and I backed them up, and then they didn't get in, and they kicked a field goal. But they had three drives that were just picture perfect, like running for 12 or 13 yards every play. They were just battering the Clemson front, running the ball at will. Tua was having his way. He had a clean pocket. The receivers were getting separation. It was like vintage Alabama passing game and running game, and then it just kind of stopped. They were on a pace for 900 yards of total offense after the first quarter, and so that was interesting how Clemson was able to, Brent Venables in particular, able to adjust and get them back in the ball game. The other two games that you mentioned, I was not surprised in that something felt right about Dan Mullen and just the trajectory of the program and how good the team felt about its season versus Michigan getting blasted by Ohio State after they had been the Big Ten favorite the whole year. And by far, they played better than anybody in the Big Ten during the season up until the game against Ohio State. And they were missing three of their best defensive players, three of the best players on that side of the ball in the country, and their 1,000-yard rusher in Kieran Higdon. So I thought the Michigan losses were going to be trouble. I picked Florida to win that game. I didn't quite pull the trigger on Kentucky winning the game. I did take the 5 points because while everybody else week to week would joke with me about Kentucky, when I ranked them, it's seemingly higher than everybody else every week of the season. I was really impressed with Kentucky. I know that the passing game was inept at times and questionable, and it was a little bit hard to watch at times. But man, that Kentucky defense I just think that they had a top 5 to 10 unit in the country. And as it got closer to game time, I thought, yeah, Kentucky, I would think is going to win this game. Surprises, other surprises for me. That Clemson-Alabama game was the big surprise. I'm not thinking of anything else in the Power 5 that really jumped out at me. I know that Northwestern came back against Utah. I did pick Northwestern to win that game as a touchdown underdog, but once they got down 20-3, that a Northwestern team could come back from 17 down against Kyle Whittingham, who never loses bowl games. He was 12-1 in bowl games coming in. That surprised me a little bit. Not that I didn't pick Northwestern to win, but once they got down by 17, those guys a pretty good Utah team.
Well, let's look at these teams that are trending upward from the bowl game. The prospects of their recruiting coming up with National Signing Day. Which 2 or 3 teams do you think is trending up the most compared to the 2018 season going into the 2019 season?
Well, Bobby, Texas seems to be the obvious choice, and I agree with that take. They've just recruited so well the last 2 recruiting classes, especially on defense. Sam Ehlinger's coming back, and he was such a better quarterback in 2018 than he was in 2017. He a fiery leader, guy that would plow over safeties and linebackers, to a real quarterback that could make the difficult throws, made the right decisions, became a polished passer. So Sam Ehlinger now can even possibly get better and lead this team that is just loaded with young talent, and Tom Herman has that definitely pointed in the right direction. I'm interested to see what Oregon does this year because they were one of my dark horses last year. They didn't quite get it done, but of course Justin Herbert announcing that he'll come back and play is a huge boost to that program. Jim Leavitt on defense, their defensive coordinator, who was the head coach years ago at South Florida, has been to Colorado, led their resurgence when they went to the Pac-12 championship game a couple of years ago. That guy is a difference maker, like a Brent Venables on defense, and he's made the Oregon defense much better than they were for a few years. So I like the way things are headed for Oregon. They recruited and signed the number 1 player in the country, Trayvon Thibodeau. So I like that uh, Oregon program coming up for 2019. As I scan the country, it's just difficult to figure out that anybody can challenge Clemson. And I love what Florida's doing under Dan Mullen. And Felipe Franks, I don't think he gets the credit for the improvement that he made as a passer this season. And we may see him take a nice leap as an even better player at that position this year. So I like Florida as well. And Jimbo at Texas A&M seems to have things going in the right direction. And his recruiting class was exceptional.
Yeah, to touch on Florida just a little bit, I've got a lot of Florida Gator fans that watch my show. This is mostly an SEC-centric show, and they're really high on this Emory Jones coming in and competing next year with Felipe Franks at quarterback. But let's move on to South Carolina. I've been thinking about all the turmoil we had in the coaching ranks coming into last year with all the first-year coaches. There's really not a lot of drama as far as coaches are concerned. The only coach that I really could say is on the hot seat would probably be Will Muschamp. Do you think that he is on the hot seat, and how much room or patience do you think South Carolina is going to have with Will Muschamp? Because I've had a lot of Gamecock fans on my show screaming for him to be fired.
Well, a lot of South Carolina fans this time last year were singing his praises because they went from 3 wins to 6 wins to 9 wins after the bowl win against Michigan. And I think most people automatically penciled them in as the second best team in the SEC East. And obviously that didn't turn out to be the case.
Yeah.
South Carolina is a program it's going to be difficult, as it always has been, aside from those 3 years there. I'm guessing, let's see, it would have been 2012, 13, and 14 when they won 11 games 3 consecutive years. Aside from that, even at their peak, South Carolina's been a 7-5, 8-4 kind of program. It's going to be difficult for them and him to break through, because I'm not saying it's easy to go from 3 wins to 6 wins to 8 wins in the regular season. They won 9, but taking that next step, you're now talking about having to beat the best teams on your schedule.
Yeah.
So they cleaned up on the Missouris and the Vanderbilts and the Kentucky. Well, they haven't beaten Kentucky for quite a long time, the Tennessees, and they beat up on. They got past those teams for the most part when they were making that upward trajectory. But now to take the next step to become a 10-2 kind of program, well, you're looking at beating Florida, beating Georgia, beating the better teams that they have to play in the West, depending on how the rotation comes up. And I believe that means Alabama this year. That to play into your narrative, Bobby. The schedule's not doing Will Muschamp any favors. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know that they've got Alabama this year. They obviously always have Texas A&M in the West, and of course they've got Clemson. So my goodness, they got to play the 2 best teams in the country most likely, and then they've got Georgia, Texas A&M, Florida on down the line. They're going to have one of the toughest schedules in the country. So I don't think that unless they have a disastrous season, I doubt that South Carolina is going to fire Will Muschamp. If they go 7-5 again, I think he's safe, but maybe 2020 will be the make or break year for him, that he really needs to break through for them to keep him around.
Well, I tend to agree with you. It's not a great place to go coach. It's going to be hard to recruit a good coach to come there. But anyway, let's move on to my team. Everybody knows I'm a delusional Tennessee fan, and we just had a coaching swap with Georgia and our offensive coordinator. It seemed like it took 6 months to figure out who we were going to hire. We had Hugh Freeze, we had Cliff Kingsbury on the radar. We had a bunch of names on the radar, and we settled on, well, I don't know if we should say settled, but we ended up getting Jim Chaney, and he's now the highest paid offensive coordinator in the country. What do you think that hire did for Tennessee and for Georgia? Because they replaced him in-house with offensive coordinator, last name's Coley. There seems to be a lot of Georgia fans that's glad to see him be gone, but I don't know how much you blame on Jim Chaney for Georgia's lapses during the season on the offense. What do you think about that whole scenario between Georgia and Tennessee with Jim Chaney?
Well, the worst thing about Georgia's offense this past year was putting Justin Fields on the field in strange times in the red zone and other times, and then the defense, based on what had been done with him and not allowing him to make throws downfield, it becoming a very predictable situation every time he stepped on the field. Other than that, I don't think that there was anything decidedly wrong with Georgia's offense, but the use of him seemed to be kind of curious to me, especially in the LSU game, as I recall. On the Tennessee side, I think that Jeremy Pruitt was the guy that needed to be hired by this program. I think that's a very solid hire. Now, whether it becomes a home run hire, I don't know, but I got to think that Tennessee fans wanted to see a real football, nuts and bolts guy who was no nonsense in comparison to what they got all the time from Butch Jones. So I know that some of the results were disappointing down the stretch. You could have made a bowl game. You lost to Vandy pretty badly, and it could have turned out better that way. But I think that Jim Chaney, he's not at the level of some of the offensive coordinator hires that you see across the country and some of the production we've seen out of Ryan Day, who obviously got the Ohio State job, or Lincoln Riley when he was at Oklahoma. He doesn't have that kind of resume, but he's certainly capable, and I would think as long as he and Jeremy Pruitt see eye to eye in the way they want to take this offense, that it's a solid hire.
I agree with you. I wasn't as thrilled about it when I first heard it because we had him here before under Derek Dooley. We had a lot of Tennessee fans say this is a home run hire, and I'm like, slow the horses down. It's not a home run until the ball clears the fence in fair territory, and that'll be next year. I told everybody, ask me after the third Saturday in October, and I'll tell you what I think about Jim Chaney. But you mentioned a team, the Big Ten. Do you think with Urban Meyer gone and Ryan Day coming in, would you put Ohio State as the favorite to win the Big Ten next year?
Well, they've got the best roster, and Michigan's somewhat close, but they definitely have the best roster of talent. And I like the changes that they made on defense in ditching Greg Schiano. They just so underachieved on that side of the ball. They played better down the stretch against Michigan and Washington and Northwestern, but that's where they could get so much better next year. They have the defensive talent. If you just look at recruiting rankings, of which I don't know if you're a big believer in the recruiting rankings, but if you're picking out specific players, sure, the recruiting rankings could be dead wrong. But as a whole, over the course of entire seasons and certainly entire rosters that are comprised of 4 and 5 years, the recruiting rankings you can line up right next to the AP Top 25, and they're pretty much going to tell you, aside from Texas disappointing under the coaches that they had, Charlie Strong prior to Tom Herman, and then on the flip side, the likes of Michigan State and Wisconsin overachieving, they pretty much tell us who's going to win these games. And Ohio State, after Alabama, should have even beyond Clemson, should have the best talent in the country for the past 4 or 5 years. So they're loaded, and they were really young this year. So I know that Haskins gets a lot of attention and him moving on to the NFL, but really Ohio State defensively, they lose Draymond Jones, you're going to see selected in the first couple of rounds of the NFL draft. But besides that, they're loaded on defense, and almost the entire defense comes back, and they're set it on the offensive side of the ball with J.K. Dobbins at running back. Of course, Justin Fields. We'll see what they have there, but they're primed as much as we would think that Urban Meyer is, certainly his record speaks for himself, is a big loss. From a talent perspective, they're primed to continue to own the Big Ten.
Do you think Ryan Day was the man for the job at Ohio State?
You know, I took survey of the country when Mark Richt, the day that kind of shocked us all,
Mm-hmm.
And he announced his retirement. And as soon as Manny Diaz was plucked up, I thought, well, prior to that, for those all but 12 hours when we didn't know who the coach was going to be, I thought, well, they need to go out and get a big hire. So I thought about it and looked across the country and thought, you know what? Look at all these big successful programs, Clemson, Dabo Swinney, Ryan Day at Ohio State. We'll see what he's got. But prior to that, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, a successor there. Clay Helton, maybe not so much considering what happened last season, but he was doing pretty well there at USC. A number of other guys. Kirby Smart obviously was never a head coach at that level. Where this has worked out for a lot of programs, where they've elevated the hotshot guy that's got a lot of energy, a lot of spunk, and Ryan Day, sure, Urban Meyer was still there, but he had to run the football operation and run the team on game day for 3 weeks this past season. Everybody speaks so highly of the guy as a mastermind on offense and a guy that I guess showed them that he could run the overall program as well. And again, it's worked in other places, so I don't expect a huge fall off.
Well, before I let you go, I know you got to run here. This is some gambling numbers, and this seems to be the talk of the SEC right now in regards to Jalen Hurts. Everybody wants to know, where is Jalen Hurts going to go play ball next year? And here's what Vegas odds are. They have Houston plus 150, Arizona plus 300, Maryland plus 400, UCLA 500, TCU plus 500, Florida State plus 750, and Florida, Louisville, and Tennessee plus 1,000. What do you think? Where do you think he's going to go? If I was to go to Vegas and I had a $100 bill and I said, "All right, Mark, tell me where to put my money," where would you tell me to put it?
So if I'm Jalen Hurts, I'm thinking about, okay, what coach do I trust? Who really knows what he's doing? Because I just left the greatest of all time. So I've got to go somewhere where the coach is at least capable, confident. The next is the offensive fit, of course. And then I'm thinking about, okay, where can I win, and some other things beyond that. And as soon as you mentioned UCLA, and when you mentioned Houston and what they've done there, those, I know Major Applewhite is moving on, but they've had a succession of really quality coaches. But with Dana Hogerson stepping in, obviously, even a more proven track record than a Major Applewhite, I would think Houston and UCLA, they just jump out at me as being a fit in terms of a coach who knows how to run and is a mastermind at running the type of offense that Jalen Hurts would succeed in, and also being prolific offenses where, especially at Houston, they would have the surrounding talents to help him be successful.
Well, I've had a couple of Maryland fans that swear to goodness that he's going to Maryland because of Loxley coming from Alabama. I don't know what you think about Maryland.
Yep. Well, the thing that's interesting about Maryland, you know, you can't compare Maryland to Ohio State or Texas week to week, but they have one of the stranger teams, at least last year, because they had Booger McFarland's kid playing running back, who was the third-rated running back in the country coming out of high school, and he had a huge game against Ohio State and really played well down the stretch overall. And that team's got a ton of team speed. And DJ Durkin, for all his transgressions there, recruited two really good classes that are now sophomores and juniors that were ranked between about 15 and 22 in the country. So they're not void of talent, and they're going to run the kind of thing that obviously with Loxley there's a comfort level there. So that's an interesting, and the only reason I bring up Ohio State and Texas was obviously Maryland, at their best, they couldn't sustain it, but at their best, they beat Texas again, and they've done it 2 straight years, and they might as well have beaten Ohio State. And so at their best, they're dangerous.
Well, Mark, we need to do this again. Maybe coming up in the preseason next year, over the summer, you need to come on to Volunteer Roadshow Sports, and host a show and take some calls from the callers, because I'd really enjoy that. A lot of my callers, they talk about you over here on my show, and I'm really glad and appreciative that you came on, Mark.
Well, that would be a whole lot of fun, Bobby. I appreciate the consideration. You do an outstanding job, and certainly a lot of the feedback that comes back to me about some other folks that are out there doing the same thing that I do, and many of those comments are about you and the great job that you do as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, I appreciate hearing that, and you have a good rest of your day.
All right, Bobby, take care.
Well, Mark Rogers, I appreciate you coming on, and y'all heard it. This guy's been doing it since 1982. I was almost in high school then, and that's a long time to be doing these pick'ems, and he's been pretty successful. I think he missed 9 during this bowl season. That's pretty impressive. But anyway, I appreciate you, Mark, for coming on the show, and y'all need to go check him out. I said it before I had him on. The link is in the description, and he puts on a fantastic show. I plan on being on his show, and I'm going to try to get him on sometime before football season, and maybe he can be a co-host with me. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to it, and hit that thumbs down if you don't like it. Of course, I don't pretend to think that everybody likes my stuff. But anyway, y'all know what's coming next if you've been watching me for a while. Thanks for tuning in. Go Vols. My Vols are going to the college football playoffs next year. I promise you that.
Go Vols!